Do you ever have one of those days where you just have to suddenly stop everything you're doing and pivot? Yeah, that was today. Many of you probably saw this little email pop up in your in-game message box, and it seems to tell you about a whole bunch of really new and exciting stuff coming to the game at this upcoming server reset. However, it doesn't actually tell you what's coming. But for those of you who follow the game's Facebook page, well, there was a massive information drop there. And the part of it that was interesting to me wasn't the actual headline of the updates, but starting to think through the strategic implications of some of the other stuff that was buried a little bit further down in the notes. Anyway, let's talk through it all together. So here's the post from the official Facebook page, and as you can see by the key art at the top, the new content they're really pushing your attention to is this new Tri-Alliance Clash. Now the explanation here isn't really that robust, but if it's anything like the winter game that Century Games also makes, well, then we kind of have a little bit of a line of sight into what this will be. And the best way I can think of describing it is imagine the matchmaking of Swordland Showdown, except it's 3 alliances, and you're not really moving around the map so much as you're choosing predetermined lanes like some souped up version of Risk. So if that sounds like a pretty complicated event, but also a lot of fun, then yeah, you'll be right. And of course, I'll do a proper guide on it eventually once it finally is implemented in our game, and we get to see how it all shakes out. So stay tuned for that. And the other big news here is Kingdom transfers. Finally! We've been waiting on this one since that June Q&A with the developers where they confirmed that this feature would be coming into the game. And if you're like me and you've been playing for quite a while, then you probably have a little bit of attrition on your server and some guilds that could definitely use some additional bodies. Or maybe you're just trying to get away from one of those horror stories I've heard about on some other servers. So of course, I'll be doing a video on just this feature as well once it's properly implemented in the game and how it all works and how you can take most advantage of it. But for now, I'll just say, my alliance is looking for people in Kingdom 21. And there's another great quality of life feature here with this third item, a second bear trap. Guys, this has been another challenge for a lot of alliances where you only have one single bear trap that gives you great Forge Hammer rewards, and it might not be at a time that many people can make due to all the different time zones. So guys, if your alliance is anything like mine, you may have set up a separate bear trap with your farm alliance so that people could jump back and forth between the 2 alliances to be able to actually make a bear trap time that worked for them. It was quite a pain having to manage for people to go back and forth constantly to do this, and it can really interfere with some of the other signups for other events like Alliance Championship or Swordlands or what have you. So it's great to see that we just won't have to work so hard to do this, and it'll just be natively something that's supported within a single alliance. So a great quality of life feature that'll make it a bit more fair for people who are just on the wrong part of the world as the rest of their alliance. And by the way, if you're just looking how to improve your score in general in the bear hunt, you should definitely check out my guide to bear hunt, linked below in the description. And there's one other new feature here that's highlighted, and guys, this one's gonna be a bit of a controversial one. But now, the Ultra Value Monthly card will include an auto help feature for the Alliance, just like the auto hunt one. This might not sound so crazy on the surface, and just a really simple quality of life feature, but it's gonna make a difference. In particular, I'm talking about Castle Battle. With this, Castle Battle will never be the same again. And here's what I mean. If you've already seen my video on batch healing, linked below in the description, then you'll know how important Alliance help is in helping you to heal your troops faster. And I hate to say it, but it's so important that sometimes alliances will even set up additional accounts with auto-clicker heal bots in order to improve the rate of assists for allies. And one could argue that this is a way to essentially turn your account into a heal bot for a monthly fee. So say you had 30 to 40 people participating in Castle Battle in your alliance, and they all happen to have the Ultra Value Monthly card with auto help turned on. Well, if you're competing against that, any troops that you defeat are basically going to get instantly healed in roughly the same amount of time it would take to send out a new march. So while before, yes, whales and even lesser spenders had an advantage in Castle Battle, it was somewhat limited by the fact that you could only send one march to one objective at a single time. But what this means is that if you have a lot of spenders, potentially even ones that are logged out, they'll be able to help assist their team win on Castle Battle. So look, it's not the end of the world, because if you're still active with free-to-play players, then you can also manually be doing the healing. But over 3 hours plus of battling, that can be a little bit tiring. And as you'll see in a moment as I get into some of these optimizations below, we read between the lines with some of these other changes, I think we're going to see a difference in how castle battles are fought. But anyway, let's walk through the rest of this and we'll get to that point when we get there. Some other optimizations that you see here. For Swordland Showdown, I actually like this one. I think building up the free march speedups at the beginning that you have is actually a great move to increase the pace of play, and in particular increase the pace of play for free-to-play players who might be a little bit weaker and maybe a bit more conservative and want to stay in the safe zone. So this means in that safe zone, you'll be able to get your troops into the fray just a little bit quicker and be able to start scoring points sooner if you're deciding to play the safe route. And guys, look, I know, I owe you a guide on Swordland. I'm working on it, I promise. That and Gen 3 Heroes. Like I said, sometimes stuff like this just drops and you gotta switch over to it. But trust me, I'm working on it. And the second update for Bear Hunt also makes sense, given what we just saw about them adding a second time. There's obviously some cooldowns and little tweaks and adjustments they need to make sure people aren't abusing that. And at the same time, they need to boost the personal rewards since these alliance damage rewards no longer make sense when your alliance might be split between two unrelated bear hunts. So this one's pretty middle of the road, straightforward, makes a lot of sense. The Viking Vengeance one I'm actually quite excited about. Probably not for the same reasons you are, but I gotta say, as a creator who's trying to frequently experiment and figure out how this game's actually working under the hood, having more information in battle reports is going to be great. I don't know how much more it'll be or how helpful it is, but Viking Vengeance is one of those interesting ones where the defensive infantry attack first. So it operates a little bit differently than other battles, and getting a chance to see a little bit more under the hood how exactly this is all coming together will be extremely valuable. And of course, this little claim all button they talk about is an extremely great quality of life feature. I guess it's not that bad, but it is kind of a pain having to click claim for each and every single reward tier, especially once you have this event on farm and you can clear all of them. But I think the bigger quality of life change is going to be this view members feature. I'll have to see exactly how it appears in the UI, but it'll be very helpful if you're trying to optimize points that you're earning in the middle of the event and maybe shuffle some things around between different players. Basically, just having a better feedback loop on where exactly your troops are that you can see all in one place will be helpful. And of course, if you do want to be getting top rewards in Viking Vengeance like me, then be sure to check out my guide linked below in the description. On Oasis Island, we get some cosmetic stuff, a little bit of more information around the history of who liked your island. I'm not really sure who was requesting that one, but it's great to know. And we get some new vegetation decoration to give a little bit more personality and differentiation in the islands, which I think is actually quite welcome. But this last one, on the decorations above level 1 to give a dismantle button, this is going to be a great quality of life improvement. And let me just show you exactly what I mean by this on the island. So if I go into this level 4 construction hut, I'm assuming what they're saying is a dismantle button will appear somewhere here. So I do get the option to retrieve it, where I can take this specific decoration and put it back into my inventory. However, if I wanted to disassemble this back into multiple construction huts for some reason, it's a bit of a convoluted process. In fact, you actually can't even do it from this window. You need to back out of it, go into your storehouse, and then from the storehouse menu, you can hit dismantle and break it down into its components. I know it's a bit of an edge case because you're not going to do this behavior that often, but if you were a player who accidentally leveled up 2 versions of the same building before you knew about the active limit, having this option available to quickly undo that in a clean and straightforward way is going to be a big help. And we have another quality of life feature relating to chat, this time allowing you to press the help button while you're in a chat window. I can see this being helpful for something like Castle Battle, where you have a lot of opportunities to provide alliance help while you're also trying to coordinate with your alliance, although it will of course be secondary to that auto help feature we just talked about. In the next changes, we get a few new daily missions added. I actually really like this feature, because if you're later in the game, where build times and research times can be quite large, you frequently don't have those at your disposal to complete your daily quest totals. And if you're not doing that, you're missing out on true gold and some of the skin tokens and some other great resources and such. So having these 2 options in there where you're most likely doing the daily pets every day will be a great way to be able to get those rewards sooner. That assumes that they do not rebase the point totals needed, and that's what we're going to have to wait and see. But on the whole, I like this one. And now we get to this bullet called hero-related features. What this essentially means is we're going to start getting labels in our hero box. So pretty soon you'll be able to see anything past, Gen 3, Gen 4, it'll start showing it somewhere on the icon here. I think this is a good change to help make the box more manageable. We're about to get Gen 4 heroes and already it's getting a little bit unruly. But I think there's a bigger challenge that they're up against here. There's a principle in game design that when you're creating the UI for something, you would create it differently for a smaller amount of objects that's going to contain versus a larger one. So something like this that worked out great at launch when there's only about a dozen heroes in the game that could show up all on one screen, this UI works great for that. But a scalability issue will start showing. So they're going to need to start doing some sort of sorting or filtering or something eventually. I think for now this change will help, but at some point as this game continues to grow and add new heroes, it won't be alone sufficient. But for now, it's a step in the right direction, and I'm very happy with it. Okay, and now we get into another controversial one. Deployment times. Now we're going back to what I was talking about with Castle Battle being fundamentally changed. I know I still haven't got around to doing the guide on Castle Battle yet, but one of the key tactics, particularly to dislodge a stronger enemy, is to send a couple of rallies in immediate succession with each other. And then if you do that, there's an opportunity that these 2 or 3 rallies combined will be able to take down a much stronger opponent before they're able to reinforce the troops that they lost from the first or second rally. Now the catch on that is it's kind of a challenge to coordinate. It actually required a decent amount of skill and teamwork to be able to get those rallies to land within a few seconds of each other. And now with this type of change, you'll be able to specify the UTC time at which the rally will move. That means suddenly every alliance is going to be able to launch 2 or 3 rallies staggered with each other and have them perfectly timed, because you've now just significantly lowered the skill threshold to do that. So what this means from a castle battle standpoint is that it's going to become much, much less likely that a single alliance will be able to camp for 3 consecutive hours on the castle. Which means castle battle times are probably going to get much longer. Because one alliance that maybe has a really strong whale that's the garrison lead could potentially block 1, maybe even 2 rallies. But if you can have 3, 4, 5 rallies coordinated perfectly all at once, with no chance for reinforcement, which by the way still needs to be done manually to time, no chance. I just don't see any alliance holding on for 3 consecutive hours and never slipping up once in that entire time. Now you could argue that this is going to make castle battles much more interesting, but it will also make them much more long, which means more troops are going to be injured. Which means, going back to new feature number 4, this auto help card becomes even more valuable when applied to healing your alliance in castle battle. And in addition, it's also going to mean that you'll be expending resources to heal a lot more. And now let's look at a couple changes related to resources. So we have this one about secured resources. On the surface, it sounds pretty innocuous. It's basically saying most of the events that are already giving out resources for individual reward milestones will now give out secured resources. In some ways this helps players because secured resources are safer if you're attacked, but on the other hand, if you're using a farm account, this has been historically a key way to get resources. So that means, in effect, this is a minor nerf to farm accounts that will now have to rely much more on gathering as opposed to event rewards to build up their resources. And it gets a little bit crazier because the next thing about resource refunds also changes farm accounts a little bit. So previously, say you had a farm account with a town center level in the high 20s, 26, 27, 28. Before, if you had a lot of secured resources that you wanted to loot from your main account, you could simply start construction on a new town center level, which would take you hundreds of millions of resources, immediately cancel it, and get them all back, and they would be unsecured. Now, it's going to remember how many secured versus unsecured resources you use for that construction. So again, this is another minor nerf to farm accounts. And these two probably aren't intentionally nerfs to farm accounts, because I could see how they would genuinely help new players who are trying to learn the game and make sure that they're not getting looted. But for us more seasoned players, these two changes combined take out a key leg of the stool that we use to be able to get extra resources from farm accounts. So farm accounts are still going to be useful, but let's just say I'm glad I didn't already make my guide for farm accounts yet. But if I take all this in totality, what it really means is castle battles are just not going to be the same. I mean, think about it. So you're going to have battles that likely take longer than 3 hours, with many, many more troops to heal. some players having an advantage of healing these troops, which means more and more troops will be coming back quicker and quicker from more combat. And one of the key ways to be able to have resources to fund all of this troop healing is now going to be a little bit more constrained. So what does this all mean for castle battles? Well, I don't quite know yet. I don't want to over-sensationalize it because I think there's still going to be a big element of strategy, but what I think is going to happen here is that these might turn in a little bit more into battles of attrition, and actually maybe having enough resources to keep healing through the whole duration of the castle battle actually becomes a bit of a competitive advantage. In fairness, that is a very accurate description of medieval warfare. So we're going to have to see how this all plays out, but my advice for now is to start hoarding as many resources as you can for the upcoming KvK castle battle. I'm sure this will all settle into a new equilibrium, but it's going to be an interesting one next time. There's a couple other minor things here that are worth talking about. Some UI UX stuff here between Alliance Brawl, Kingdom of Power, even soldier training, being able to quickly jump between the buildings. I think this is all good stuff. I think it's very healthy. I love seeing when developers continue to invest in the games in this type of way. It shows they listen to player feedback and make it easier for in the future new players to become better acquainted with the game and keep the player base healthy. So I'm all for this sort of stuff, just not really much else to discuss here. This last one also is interesting on packs. It seems like the daily deals are going to be getting a little bit better. I don't know exactly what that means yet specifically, but I will just call attention to the little watch out here, which is if you're used to making purchases right at the server refresh, maybe on this one for September 4th, just give it a little bit of a moment until the new update hits and you might get better value out of it. So on the whole, quite an interesting bag. Look, I am super excited about some new events coming, especially ones that have new gameplay mechanics in it and potentially reward you for building your roster wider versus deep, which I think this event might actually be. And I really think the kingdom transfer thing will be important to keep the player base healthy. And again, stay tuned to my channel. I'll be working as much as I possibly can to get guides up on these both in a timely manner. But again, I've got a long list of all of your other requests that I'm working through, so please just be patient with me. We'll get there. And I'm also really bullish on a lot of these other quality of life features. I think they'll go a long way in addition to helping attract new players, but even just helping alliances stay together across time zones for things like the second bear hunt. The only one that feels like a bit of a mixed bag is how all of these changes sort of will impact castle battle. I mean, look, you're playing a mobile game. Part of the deal is that you're always going to expect new features. But I think the real hidden byline here is castle battles just aren't going to be the same. And I'm not trying to sensationalize it, but I think if you put all of these things together, between the rally coordination leading to longer match times, mixed with the auto help and healing, and the reduced ability to generate resources from farm accounts, it's just going to change the constraints. And that may not be a bad thing, particularly if you're in a server where one alliance is just always winning it as a foregone conclusion. This may give you a chance to actually outwork them. Anyway, that's enough talking about all the new features here. I hope this was helpful in terms of sharing some of my thoughts on how the game's strategy might be evolving a little bit in light of some of these changes, but we're just going to have to go on this journey together. So thanks again for watching, and happy gaming out there.